Hi there, it's Mare. I am back to show you my other two vintage journals that I've just completed. Let's go through this one. I've used a vintage book that I have salvaged, rescued, however you want to put it. Oh, a little string, okay. And I've just made this little tassel here and some rusted letters that say vintage as the charm. Use some vintage laces on the spine, vintage doily and lace here, vintage doily up there, just has a muslin closure. Before I forget, if you haven't so already, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be updated on all my new videos. This has a vintage key, skeleton key there. I love them. And let's get the stats on this one. This is 7 3/4 by 5. My last video, I did show this green one and the burgundy one. If I didn't say so, I don't think I did in my last video. This is 6 3/4 by 4.5 with 40 pages, 80 front to back. Grandma here, I said 7 3/4 by 5. It has 44 pages, 88 front to back. And again, this one spills over, chunky. And here I've just made a pocket and this little postcard. I have a lot of these, and I should probably do a little craft with me on them. I just bought a bunch of blank postcards and put some pretty pictures on them. And this has just a flip here, double page, and then some vintage ledger. I'm using some of the vintage ledger notebook paper that I talked about in my other video. This is from 1911 here. A little tab, little tuck spot here with a vintage postcard, and a little piece of ephemera. Looks like Tim Holtz. And here's some paper that I've backed it on. Made these key out of no, why can't I think of it? Chipboard. There you go. And just decoupage some key stuff on there. Some vintage lace trim, and a little ephemera piece here. A vintage tag. And here is a piece out of an antique or vintage autograph book from 1934. And I will put all that back in. Vintage railroad ephemera here, coffee dyed papers, copy of vintage receipt, some of that notebook or ledger paper here. And just made some coffee dyed paper here with a flip on that, and that is just the cover or the top of a vintage envelope from 1955. Thought that was cute. Little tuck spot. Another one of those autograph pages, I believe. Oh, no, it's a little vintage receipt from 1927. Little file folder here with some paper. There's some more writing space. Some of that from my vintage ledger that I have. Little tab. This folds down. Paper. Vintage ledger here and vintage notebook paper here that I've used some of that vintage style tape that we make with the alcohol inks. This is like a little registry ledger. Little tag here, little ticket I should say. It just fits up in there. This folds down, and I've just made a tag here that I've put in there. This opens up this way, just a little tri-fold of paper. And I just stick that in here, and it tucks back up in there. little pocket out of collage board that I've made. Vintage photograph. Look at all those little kids. It's so cute. Just some junk mail envelope that I've covered and collaged. And just put a vintage cabinet card in here. And I figured since it is like a grandma book here, it puts a lot of pictures of little kids. That is super, super cute. She's holding a wooden spoon, this little girl. And it folds out. Added some writing space there, a vintage receipt here. Put a little gesso over that, but I wanted to keep the dates visible. That's 1946. Little flip up here. And another double with a flip this way. Little pocket here. The tabbed journaling card there. Paper. Put a little charm on here, just a little inspired charm. Copy of a vintage receipt, and I just tucked some extra paper in this. And it just flips up. Of course, you can write here as well. Little guest check on the other side. Another flip here. I have a little glassine envelope here, a couple little pieces of ephemera in it. Vintage envelope, empty. This is from 1957. It's still usable to put little notes in or such. Little pocket here, side pocket. Little Tim Holtz little girl picture there. And I've just added some of those nursing notes, 1942, and there's blank sheets to go with it. Little embroidery piece there that I've attached with this paper clip with a little teddy bear on it, teddy bear charm. Gessoed a copy of an old workbook. A couple of pages here, some ledger, vintage ledger. Little belly band here. We just made a little booklet. And then one of those little tiny booklets with the vintage little girl cards. And it just sets in there. Oh, I don't know where that came from. I will put that back in there. And some paper here. Just put some trim on this. I believe it's new trim. Made a little pocket here, and there is another page from an autograph book, 1905, and this handsome gentleman in this picture. Vintage photo. Coffee dyed paper. Some ledger. This is just a pretty embellishment here. Different fabrics, and you could tuck something up in there if you like. And a side pocket here at the back. Copy of a vintage photo here. Journaling card here. I put paper on the back. Oh, okay, there we go. And this is from looks like 15, 16. Copy of a vintage receipt. And then there's a little legal department. Looks like 1914. So not all the ephemera will match the envelopes, but I've tried to put a vintage envelope and letter and some receipts in each of these vintage journals. Put little tabs on them as well, and that closes that. So it's chunky, doesn't fully close, probably doesn't fully open, which is fine with me. I like them chunky, and that is that. Okay, put my ephemera aside there. And now the other one is this vintage speller book. This one is 7 inches by 4.5. It has 40 pages, so 80 pages front to back. It has a vintage skeleton key there, vintage laces on the spine, muslin closing that just ties around there. And I put the metal keyhole embellishment on this as well. Little flower here with a little crystal brown in the center. Open it up here. Just put a little tuck with a charm and a little cluster. Made a lot of these little clusters. There's a vintage photo, and let's see, I've got some vintage receipts from 1956. A little page out of an autograph book from 1934, and a vintage tag. It just tucks right in there. Oh, I probably had that in there, didn't I? Yep. Anyway, there's a little pocket here. Copy of a vintage receipt. Some of, looks like some coffee dyed parchment paper here and here. A little vintage receipt from 1956 there. Vintage ledger paper. Railroad ephemera there. Vintage ledger. Some tickets that I just made some of these stamping things here, and some tickets that just sit inside there, and that opens. Little belly band here, just a little stubby one. Made a little matchbook here with some extra paper. And this little book out of the vintage cards. Decorated envelope, vintage button, vintage laces. And this is open. Throughout the back here, it would be easy to set a picture in there. I've included this little vintage photo. Just going to switch that out. I've also added this little booklet. This is from 1937. Some blank pages as well. They are very fragile. They might have to be backed if you wanted to, and that just sticks out the top like that. Here I've made a tuck on the other side of the envelope with a vintage postcard from 1903. Here's just a little tuck, little decoupage tag that I've made. Just sits in there. Here's a little frame that I've put a vintage photo in. Look at those gents. I just love that picture. Here's the area for journaling. This unfolds. And where it was fragile, because they are so old, from 1947, just put some washi tape there. There's an entry from 48. That's just clipped on there. Little vintage photo of this house. Another cluster was on there. So in all of these vintage style junk journals, or journals I should say, they have a lot of the same, but each is the original, I think. Okay, 1956. This is an old envelope, blank. Great to fill with letters. Here's some of that paper from the nursing school, 1942. Another postcard that I've put this pretty picture on. And a little heart charm. Some more ledger that folds out, vintage ledger. Coffee dyed paper. And this I just didn't want to change. It was from another notebook that I had, a vintage one, and somebody had made these little triangles here out of notebook paper, and I just liked it, so I kept it on there. Some computer paper, vintage receipt from 1906 copy. And a flip up here. And here's another little charm. And it comes off. And here is a big railroad ephemera piece, a form. Did a little bit of inking on there. Little rusted paper clip. And here's a vintage postcard. Little cluster, fabric cluster tuck spot there. And a back pocket. And I've put a little mini file folder with some paper in there. Another vintage postcard here, 1907. And a little envelope with a little letter in it, may or may not match. A little note. And that sits in there, little Tim Holtz picture. I did put a little paper on the back in case you wanted to put a little word or something there. And a little bling charm. A bling charm with a little key as well, and that is the back. Okay, and that is this one. Again, my Etsy shop is Lilac Pages, and please subscribe and like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I appreciate the support. Have a great day. Goodbye.